All right, let's go ahead and get started. So, welcome. Thank you for joining me. And this is my weekly Wednesday live stream journal session. So, I'm just going to continue working in this little journal that I've been kind of working on since the beginning of May. So, if you want to grab some stuff and work along with me, that's awesome. And as always, if you want to say hi in the comments, let us know where you're tuning in from. That's always great to see. And of course, if you have any questions or any comments, of course, you can put those in the comments as well. So, anyway, I'm going to go ahead and dive in. And I'm so glad that you can join me today. All right, so I've got my little journal. This is that Stillman and Birn Zeta series journal that has a real heavy duty, uh, thick paper in it. And I've been working on it, like I said, since the beginning of May. And I did the daily live streams in May. Now I'm just kind of doing it weekly and kind of working near the back now. Not that I'm feel like I'm finished with all these pages up here, but just kind of feel like they're really coming along. And I was looking through this today. So what I kind of do is I sit down and like look through it and just sort of think about a direction that I can start. And I was attracted to this page, and it's one of my favorites. Just I love the profile, and I love the fact that there's the gap. And if you don't remember, or if you didn't see that episode, I guess is a good way of saying it. I folded a little piece and created a flap, and then that got glued, and that's what creates the gap there. And I just find that really kind of interesting. So immediately, I was kind of drawn to this, and I wanted to do some things. With this profile. So I've kind of worked on it, started building up, and I think I maybe even worked on it some last time. But I wanted to do a few things to kind of repeat the profile. I mean, I love like, this opens and now it's like the two profiles talking to each other. If I flip this out, the profile is looking out that way. But I thought it might be really interesting. Let me get the thicker pen. I just thought it might be interesting if I trace the profile. Oops. I don't know if you can see, I kind of slipped and went where I didn't want to go, but that's all right. That's part of the making process. Okay, so that easily I've got that profile repeated, and I'm just going to thicken this line, and that way it's a little bit easier to see, and then I can maybe work and add some things to it. What I'm thinking is I might add some paint to this and change the color, which I think that's the direction I'm going to go, but we'll kind of wait and see. So I really appreciate folks tuning in and just continuing to work with this little journal. I'm really kind of digging it. I was looking at it a little while ago and just kind of realized like I think I may have even mentioned this and talked about this, that this is very different than how I usually work in my big journal, my everyday journal. And this is definitely what I would consider more of an art journal. Whereas I'm trying, where I'm kind of trying to make every every page or every spread kind of a resolved piece of art. So anyway, so I like that. Like I said, I'll probably paint this, but not quite yet. I flipped it over like this, and I like that. But then I was like, yeah, what if I had a profile over here? I just like that repetition, so that as I'm flipping through, it's like, oh, I see a profile, and then it's repeated, opening it up, it's repeated, closing that up. It just creates this repetition. It really ties pages together. So I don't know if I'm gonna don't know if I'm going to thicken this one up, so I'm just going to leave that one as it is for now. And then I think I'm going to go back to this little space. I just want this to be a different color than that, and kind of thinking, oh, we got some of the purples and the fuchsias and stuff, so maybe I'll use that. Maybe I will go with, let me just hit, got my paint up here, let me just hit that fuchsia. I can always come back if I wanted to add a different color to it. But the paint's a really quick and easy way to change the color, and because it's transparent, it doesn't cover up all of the layers that I did already. Okay, so I like the fact that that's blue and then that's different, and just this is still wet, and I just kind of closed it, rub it a little bit. That way I don't have to worry about drying it with a hair dryer. And it creates some interesting things there where the wet paint touches. Um, so I'm thinking with over here, maybe I'll use uh, a water soluble pencil, but I don't know yet. The other thing I was thinking about with this spread particularly, I was kind of flipping through and seeing how last time I worked on these pages, I added some collage, I added some water soluble pencil, and I started really just building up the layers on these pages, and ended up putting paint on all the pages so that every page has something on it besides just like a pencil line. And so just slowly kind of building those up, but then like flipping back and like realizing that, okay, like these spaces don't really have words, and that's kind of, well, that's part of the journaling process for me, is using words. And so I was just kind of thinking like, oh, what kind of words? And for some reason I liked the three yellow squares here, and I thought like, oh, if I had three words there. And so I started thinking about the words, and I I kind of, this is an emergence journal. This is all about that word emergence, about things kind of coming to light, or things coming out or breaking apart, new things emerging, um, new directions emerging, and all that kind of stuff. And one of the words that kind of just popped up while thinking about all that was that idea of discovery or discovering. And then I thought, well, okay, could I use that with a couple other words? And all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's three words that are all related, all have the word cover in it, and they all kind of fit this idea. So I think I'm going to go ahead. That this is like wet, it's curling, it's kind of like bugging me a little bit. Keep kind of like being careful that I'm not going to like smush it and fold the nose over or something. But anyway, back to the words. So I was thinking about that idea of discover or discovering, but then that also brought up the idea of uncovering. So I think I'm going to write that. So uncovering, discovering. I like playing with words like this. This idea of covering is in each one, and then it just, they all sort of have a slightly different meaning, and then discovering, and then how about recovering? And like I said, I kind of just, those words came to me as I was looking through it, and that just happens so often that it's like I was flipping through the pages, thinking about how I wanted to use some kind of text in it, some kind of wording, and just thinking about that theme of emerging. and that idea of discovering came up, and then that led to the other words. And I think it all kind of ties into that bigger theme of emergence. You know, this idea of uncovering. Sometimes there are things that we have to uncover, things that we have um, within us that, you know, strengths maybe that we didn't know were there, and we have to uncover them. They were there, but we didn't recognize them. Um, Uncovering and discovering are very similar, but discovering might be that idea. Like I kind of feel like uncovering is it's already there. Discovering is like finding something new. Very similar to that idea of uncovering, but not always. I mean, you know, you can discover new places. If you're uncovering new places, that kind of almost feels like you're excavating. So I'm just going back. I used my wonky handwriting and just wrote in cursive, and then just going back over and making things thicker and darker, make it stand out more. And this notion of recovering, like recovering something that has been lost. I just like how all these words tie into the theme of emergence, and really just I don't like to spell things out. You know, it's like I like to leave some kind of ambiguity, and what happens is then the viewer has to kind of connect the dots, and that's why I love some of those juxtapositions, those times when words sort of fell in spots where you know, just wasn't planned, like this idea of stardust with the brain, um, or up here, let's see, this escaping fell here with the face. You know, so there were just things that fell in spots where it was like I didn't plan it, but it was just kind of interesting. Like up here, habits of thought, and then I wrote the word revealing. So how the beetle over here relates to the words, relates to this image, relates to the maps. It's there's not like this clear message that I've written out saying this is what this means. And so for me, that's what I like. You know, there's an implication of meaning. It's not about like here's exactly what this means and what I'm thinking, even though I'm talking about kind of what I'm thinking about. But if you're looking through a book, if you're looking through something, then you know there's you as the viewer have to participate. So anyway, so that's kind of a couple things that I've been thinking about whenever I was first looking through this, and just kind of thinking now. Let me grab. I think I'm gonna grab this. Just gonna draw some rectangles around. So those rectangles kind of help bring some focus and some emphasis on the words, but then it also echoes the red rectangles that I've done before with words in it. And, you know, so just sort of that idea of having a rectangle But of course, this is a drawn rectangle, a little bit different, but and so I may do something around these rectangles, maybe to help even emphasize the rectangles and the words even more. But I don't know yet. I'm not sure. I don't have a clear idea. And so that can be something that comes up a little bit later. That's what I like about this approach of, not having like, oh, I have to finish this before I move on. It's like, this can be what it needs to be for now, and then I can come back and add to it. Okay. So just looking at this spot now, I was saying like, I might use my water soluble pencils. So I think that's what I'm going to do. Let's grab my violet, which is slowly getting shorter and shorter. Yeah, it just darkens that up, makes that profile pop. And I am going to dry this because I don't particularly want the purple to transfer over here. So I'm going to hit this with the hair dryer. I'll go ahead and mute it. All right. Okay, so like I said, I really like how that all kind of really relates. And even this, like the kind of the double profile, just gives a lot of interesting meaning or kind of ambiguity. I mean, that idea, this almost reminds me of, there's two faces, so it's like two-faced. I don't know, just kind of, or it's like looking in opposite directions. So there's just all this subtleness to it that like you don't plan it out, but it's there. And there's just all this like layering and the ideas come together and create a message that you don't plan out verbatim. The viewer has to kind of fill in some of that. All right. So one of the things that I've actually thought about since I started this was I really, I was very thoughtful about having things, the pages tie together. And I did that with color by having the color wrap around. I've had collage and image transfers and things wrap around. I've had maps go from page to page. I've had the the writing go from page to page. I've had lines go from page to page. But a lot of that's very subtle. So like if you're looking through it, it might not be something that you notice right away. Um, but that I've been very purposeful about that. But I was thinking like I want maybe something that's a little less subtle, and so I pulled out an acrylic paint marker, um, and this was actually an empty marker that I bought, and I filled it with paint. So the marker is made by Montana, but the paint inside of it is golden high flow, which is kind of like more of an inky kind of paint, and very, very fluid, more fluid than their fluid acrylics. Um, and it's more like an acrylic ink. And now Montana makes their own paint, and they have like a whole line of colors for their paint markers. But I bought the high flow, and I was like, oh, I want to be able to draw with it. And so of course I bought the empty markers, and you can fill them up. So this has just not a super fat tip, kind of almost the size of a Sharpie, maybe a little bit thinner. When I use these, I tend to have a scrap of paper just because you press the tip down to get the paint to flow, and sometimes it can kind of blob out. So anyway, I could kind of pick lines that I've already drawn and go through that. But the nice thing with the acrylic, now I do have a red Faber-Castell Pitt Artist pen, but this ink is in the Pitt Artist pen is more transparent, whereas this should be a little bit more opaque, not completely opaque, but should stand out a little bit more. So anyway, so the idea is just to kind of just thinking about how this can go through. And since this is a brighter red, it's going to be a little less subtle. And that's pretty thin. I think I want it to be a little bit thicker. I do have a bigger marker, but it's much, much thicker. So I'm just going to go over this a second time and just make it a little bit thicker. So I don't use like regular acrylic paint. I know a lot of uh, art journalers and visual journalers use acrylic paints in their journals. And even in a lot of my earlier journals, I used a lot of acrylic paint. Not so much now. I mean, I do every once in a while. And it's more about like if I was using acrylic paints like to paint with, and I had extra left over, then it's like, what do I do with the extra? And but I like the markers. Sometimes with the acrylic paint, it can stick. So like whenever the pages come together, they can stick. It's less likely with the marker. Now I can see that maybe the marker is not totally dry, so I am gonna hit it with the hair dryer. But you know, this is just like a single line if I wanted to do another one. But the idea is that this is going to be like a red thread that kind of goes through. And I'll talk about the red thread in a minute, but let me go ahead and hit this with the hair dryer. So this paint, it soaks into the paper pretty easily, but over here on the picture was slightly glossy, so it wasn't quite dry. But you know, it's like you can really see that red line, and I love how it shows up on that black. Um, but the idea of the red thread, actually, I first sort of heard about it from a friend who, in her art, she always would put a red line, and oftentimes it would be red thread, like she would paint in like a sewing needle, and it really became part of her artwork. and it was just this notion of being connected. And I did like a real quick search, and there's some stories and things that are out there about how a lot of times the red thread is kind of like you and your soulmate are connected with that red thread. Um, but I really think of it as how we are connected to each other. And here with the map, I kind of picked up some of the red highways in the maps. And with these two pages, there that red thread is kind of like right in the middle, so you're definitely going to kind of see it. You hit this with the hair dryer because it's on top of some tracing paper and it's not quite dry. So Alicia's put in there about the red thread equaling 6 degrees of separation. Yeah, that idea just of how we're all connected. So maybe with this one, I don't want to go. Well, actually, so if I look here, I have that red that goes through the window. So it might be interesting if this comes down and then connects with the one in the window, just like I did with the ink lines that I drew a while ago. Now over here I have the tape transfer, and even though this is acrylic, it might draw on top and it will dry. It won't be very stable. It will scratch off. So I am going to make sure I have paint and then just have it come down below. Again, this, I have some maps there so I can sort of meet up with the red line on the map. But this was a thought that I had from almost the very beginning of starting this journal, like an element that I knew I wanted to put in there. So oftentimes, I'm working more intuitively, and kind of one decision leads to another. But this was a thought. This was something that um, I thought I wanted at the beginning, and here I am working through it, and just kind of feel like, yeah, it'd be cool to have that go through it. And it might end up, if one kind of seems to throw things off balance. I don't know if it does. Um, like I said, it's still subtle. Um, but I could always come back and add some more. And I think with this page, it will help. I think I'll have it come up and go through. It'll help kind of divide up the space a little bit more. But there's a variety of paint markers that you can use. I used to use some metallic paint markers, get a real kind of metallic shine to it, much more than the metallic Sharpies, and more stable than the metallic gel pens. Um, and I know a lot of people use the Posca paint pens, and they're pretty good, especially like on shiny surfaces, like on magazines and such. They work really well. Okay. Just looking, I've got this piece of map that goes across, and there's definitely some red lines. I'm thinking about having it come down and connect to that, and actually might be a good way. These three words kind of float on top of everything. So if I have the red line go across, it'll push that word down a little bit, and then I can hook up with this highway. I think it goes all the way across. Now there's colored pencil around this, but this should work pretty well on top of the colored pencil. Yeah, acrylic, well, just like paint markers in general can be a really good way to add like a final layer to mixed media work. Allows you to draw, and especially if the paint's pretty opaque, and it can really allow you to draw on top of everything and not sort of get lost. Using the Pitt artist pens or anything like that, since they are kind of transparent, they can kind of get lost a little bit. So again, just kind of thinking about how that line kind of works its way through. I think what I'll do is I'll work it through this and then over here and maybe stop on this page. I do envision it going through all of the pages, but it's definitely not something that has to all be done today. I feel like this needs to join up with this, and then it can join up with the map. This is probably something that I wouldn't do in my big journal. I cut windows and tie certain pages together, but I don't really think about how I can tie every single page together. Whereas with this book, that's part of the fun has been to think about how all of these things can be linked together. So I think I'll just stop it there. It actually connects with part of the map. And so with that line being more on top of everything, I think it'll be more obvious that that's definitely like going from page to page. Like even though I feel like a lot of these pages through here are pretty resolved, just kind of looking at them again to think about what else I want to add. This I feel like is missing something, and so I feel like I want to add something else over here. Maybe another image transfer, maybe a piece of a photograph of some sort. I don't know. I have to come back to that. I'm almost thinking like a magazine picture back on that page. Still don't know if I want to add anything around those rectangles, so we'll wait. I think I'll just hit up some of these pages in the back here. I just feel like some horizontal lines. So anyway, I think that's a good kind of stopping point. All right. So as I've said before, if you have any questions or comments or concerns, go ahead and pop them into the comments, and I can always try to address them either now or later. So yeah, so just kind of continuing with this, developing more and more. And even though pages might seem or feel like they're finished or resolved, oftentimes you can go back and add like just little touches that can like really enhance them and bring them out and just add a little bit of something different to them. So anyway, so yeah, I'll be back same time next week. Got to think about my weeks coming up. I have summer camps coming up where I'm teaching kids summer camps, and a lot of those are in the afternoon. So I will probably have to adjust my schedule for live streaming over the next couple months. But definitely next week I'll be here at 3 p.m. same time. So anyway, just let me know if you have any questions or comments, and I really appreciate you being here and tuning in. So um, please let me know if I can do anything for you. So thank you so much, and as always, happy creating.